Let's talk Jinx. A weekly Jinx video we do every Wednesday about anything to do with Jinx, as well as this video acting as a weekly discussion thread on the Jinx subreddit, our League of Jinx. Make sure to check that out. And it's patch day for patch 10.4, which means we're going to talk about changes to Jinx, changes that might happen to other AD carries that might affect Jinx's matchups, and then something of a pseudo AD carry tier list at the end of this video with your help. Now, a quick caveat, a quick note if you will, the patch was delayed a day because Monday was President's Day in the United States, where Riot is HQ'd. So that means the patch will be delayed one day, and by the time this video comes out, patch 10.4 will not be hitting live until the next day. So we gotta make some predictions with this one, but we can still go over the patch notes because they did come out. So with that being said, there were no changes to Jinx, but there were changes to other AD carries that might affect Jinx's matchup in lane. First and foremost, Phaleas. Right now, some of the changes that are coming to him is players can see both of Phaleas' guns. Calibrum no longer resets basic attack timer after consuming a mark, and Cressidum's sentries die faster and the R range has been decreased. For those that don't know, when you use your Q on Phaleas, depending on the gun that you have, it does a different ability. So the guns themselves kind of have like different special things to them, like one gun is about long range, one gun's about lifesteal, etc, etc. On his 5th gun, the one that comes with like the spinning blade of death or whatever that he throws back and forth, think of it like a Gnar boomerang if it was an auto attack. I think I Keep It Taco described it best like that on his stream once. When he presses Q, when he has that gun specifically, that's where you see that sentry kind of turret drop down based on his offhand weapon. So if his offhand weapon, for example, is the flamethrower, he drops down a turret that's basically the flamethrower that has a bunch of AoE damage and stuff like that, or it's the long range gun, which that's how people are dying from long ranges sometimes and such like that. So what they're doing here is that range was infinite actually on the Calibrum, I believe, was the one that had like the infinite R range, long range, marking, stuff like that. When you use Q first on a target, they're not making it a specific range. I believe it's 1800 down from infinite. And on his R, and that can be a little bit confusing too, because his R is like the same thing on all of his guns, but do different things depending on the gun you have. And like level 6 will be achievable in lane for Phaleas. So these are things you might want to look out for, is if he's dropping the sentry turret and trying to do things with that as well in lane and whatnot. But like pre-6, the matchup at this point will still basically be the same. You want to watch out for that first gun, because that's the long range gun when it comes to trading and stuff. You won't, it won't be the same as using mana with rockets to try and trade pound for pound with him. But once it gets to the other guns, and once it gets to level 6 and the sentry changes, that might be where stuff gets a little bit better. On top of that, the clarity might actually be something good for you. They do mention that clarity might actually be a little bit of a nerf in itself to Phaleas, because you can kind of see what he's doing. But in case it's not, they paired it with raw nerfs. So that matchup, though, I do feel that matchup is so still all over the place, because Phaleas just does so many. He's like a smorgasbord of AD carries. I don't know how much things really change, because honestly he's banned so often. I don't really see the Jinx Phaleas matchup enough to give you a good, accurate description. So if you, in fact, do play against a lot of Phaleas, because he makes it through pick ban, comment below with your own experience with the matchup, and with these changes, how much you think it's going to impact the Jinx Phaleas matchup. Now, speaking of a more traditional Jinx matchup, we have Caitlyn changes, the Hat Lady herself, with the bonus attack speed at level 1 being increased, going from 10% at level 1 to 20% at level 1, which is actually a pretty decent increase for a sniper rifle. I guess if you want it to be a machine gun sniper rifle, well then there you go. Jinx also have the advantage with the minigun, of course, with the attack speed built into her minigun, but just be aware, because the Caitlyn's already starting long range, she's gonna have also a little bit extra attack speed, and if she's a Caitlyn that plays in the brush whatsoever, they do that so they can get their headshots procs twice as fast, right? Every auto attack you do in a brush with Caitlyn doubles the stacks on your headshot procs. Instead of having to shoot like 6 auto attacks for the 7th one, it's like 2 auto attacks basically per auto attack. So just keep that in mind. This one's going to be a little bit faster coming out, and if she plays with the brushes, that means she's probably going to try and use the headshot procs a bit more often as well, because she'll be faster and proc them more often. There is like the extra brush that's in the bot lane, something we never really talked about before, period, when it comes to this matchup, but now we might as well throw that in. Another change we'll mention is Lux, because they are doing this change to try and buff support Lux. Now, primarily in high elo, so if you're high elo watching this, then this one's mainly for you, but also in case it comes into low elo as well. The Q damage is being increased, but it's decreased in its cooldown early. Lux can now flash while casting R. So essentially, the damage is being increased if she lands her binding, and the cooldown is also being decreased early in lane. They kind of wanted to be able to hit those bindings a bit more instead of just being the throw out the E, kind of spam the E and detonate kind of a thing. And she can also flash when using R, like Jinx can flash when using Super Mega Death Rocket. So if you're playing against Lux, be aware of more bindings. Remember, she can bind 2 people in a row, so it's not like Morgana. If you're in minions, you're completely safe. And if you're playing with the Lux support, just know that that will be up more often for her to toss out if you're looking for opportunities to kind of pin someone down with the Flame Chompers. Sona. Now these are primarily, I guess, for top lane, but we'll mention them just in case. The Auroras now grant Sona mana at the first ally tag, but the Q, W, and E costs have been increased. That might kick her out of top lane, but it might make her still a support player, so just something to keep in mind, that basically her costs have been increased on everything but her R. So you actually might see her less because of that, because her mana cost might be at a point and she's already kind of one of the squishiest champions in the game. People might say, well, why don't we pick something better? Also more of a top lane change, but again, just in case, Soraka. The base stats adjusted, the Q self-heal, rejuvenation heal, duration, and bonus movement speed decreased, the Q cost has been increased, the W health cost decreased when rejuvenated, and the heal will increase later. And so in lane, these changes probably won't be felt as much as they will be out of lane, so playing like against Soraka support, again, this is really for top lane Soraka, so I don't really think it changes the impact on her support laning that much. And in fact, in the patch notes, they mentioned they want to keep the impact on support to a minimum, so not a lot changes here when you're playing with one or if you're playing against one. Now, one change that might affect supports that you're playing with specifically is they are doing an exhaust buff. Small buffs to exhaust, where instead of the duration being 2.5 seconds, it's now going to be 3 seconds. So if you've been playing with supports that are taking Ignite a lot, that's because exhaust got nerfed quite a bit ago, and it just felt better to take Ignite on literally everything. Now you might see some supports taking exhaust a bit more often, especially if you have enough CC to chain lock someone down when a jungler's ganking and things like that. So if you see exhaust coming back into play, also note you might be playing against it a bit more. I don't know if the half second is going to be like super impactful over Ignite in a meta where people kind of want to kill lanes and stuff like that, but just in case, right? Like if a Nautilus is going in on you, he also wants to exhaust you instead of ignite you because he feels like that would be a better option. Keep that in mind. Now to get to the part of the video you're actually here for, the AD carry tier list, in which case, again, your input's going to be needed, because especially because the patch has been delayed a day, what we tend to do is we take those changes we saw in the patch, apply them to a site like champion.gg, op.gg to look at current trends, and try and predict what will or will not happen going into the next patch. Like, for example, there are no Sona changes, but according to champion.gg, Sona is actually still one of the top AD carries you can play right now, even in the AD carry role. She does look a bit weaker than she was before, but she's still up there with Misfortune as well. So the changes did affect them, it looks like, but not a whole heck of a lot. So the change up against Jinx, for example, isn't really changing, but also as just a tier list, these still look like to be top tier AD carries you can pick. Ashe has been kind of quietly creeping up there, especially with a champion that has utility as well, which can be effective in early game team fights and even late game pick potential. Ashe looks like she could be a pretty good AD carry. Now, as a Jinx channel, we do gotta mention where Jinx is. On this list specifically, she is in the top 10 AD carries, and a lot of those AD carries actually have AD carries 3 through 10, as a matter of fact, a 51% win rate, and it's all just by point something that variances them. So Jinx is actually still a pretty decent AD carry on this patch, especially if Leona and Nautilus are still sticking around. Again, with the Flame Chompers, chaining CC, and such like that, that can be pretty good. A support that's kind of been creeping up a little bit after the buffs last patch is also Lulu, which is a champion that Jinx can like playing with, especially out of laning phase, especially with the peel and protection she can get. It does mean in laning phase you might sacrifice a bit against more of an all-in kind of an enemy comp, but it's not necessarily the worst thing ever to have a Lulu and all that stuff when people trying to dive you with the ultimate and etc, etc, ggGetJinxed, nightmares, or memories, depending on how fondly or how much you didn't like that meta back in Season 5. But that could be something that could also edge Jinx up a little bit in this list, because we are dealing with a list that has like Veigar, Heimerdinger, and Cassiopeia on here. If we knock all those champions away, Jinx is almost one of the top 5 AD carries then on this patch, kind of neck and neck with things like Twitch and Kog'Maw, which, despite being more late game scaling AD carries, are apparently doing very good on the current patch, and with the changes coming, probably will still do good on the next patch. But the top tier things you probably want to go for if you're not a Jinx player is, again, Sona, Misfortune, and Ashe. I would actually personally recommend staying away from Kog'Maw unless you're a Kog'Maw player, only because, like, if you're a flavor of the month AD carry player watching at this point, you probably want to avoid Kog'Maw because he's one of the most peel reliant and not really self-peel efficient AD carries in the game, despite what his score is saying. I don't think he's actually bad, but I am saying if you just pick up a champion because they're good and you want to go for one of these more late game scaling AD carries, Jinx bias aside, she is probably one of the better ones, but also Twitch is also a possible opportunity there as well. Vayne, of course, meanwhile, rounding out that top 10. Vayne having a little bit of self-peel potential. She does have that low auto-attack range, but it doesn't seem to be harming her too much in the current meta that she's still above 50% win rate. If you want to look at 50% win rate AD carries, it's like the medium. So like, not really S tier, not really A tier, but like B tier because they're still decent, because they're at 50 or higher. You do have Jhin, Kalista, and Talia. And this is the first time in a while I can remember Kalista not being like the absolute worst AD carry of the game. So that might be something that's aimed at pro play. Pro play has been picking up Kalista quite a bit here and there in certain regions, especially Korea, and I've seen more so in NA after Korea, not really so much the EULCS, the LEC, sorry, that's a branding thing, I keep forgetting. But Talia, maybe we cannot put that one up there. But Jhin is actually pretty decent. He can obviously you can't DPS tanks, but if they don't have tanks, Jhin is probably a good champion to pick up right now. So that's all for this video. Again, in the comment section down below, comment with what you think are the best AD carries depending on your elo, and let's have a conversation about this. But thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, the actual subscribe button. But I don't know which video will be next, because life can have a lot of kinks. So till this time, take care. GG, get jinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.